Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another Rogues Chat. This time, I have Kinography here with me. For me, the biggest thing is that, he helps us think in a different way about social stealth in Assassin's Creed, particularly like around the Ezio trilogy. Do you want to just introduce yourself and say a little bit something about you?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be on here. I'm Kinography or Kino. I make guide content. I try to kind of develop some kind of, idea of, how do we actually understand the stealth in these games, like codify different kind of community discoveries, things like that. Thinking is a big thing for me. I think maybe that's going to be one of the sort of topics or themes, how we actually think about these games that
Yes.
I think is important for us to hit on. But I'm
Yes.
very glad to be invited on here. I'm quite excited.
Awesome. I'm excited as well. It's awesome to have you here. So, how did you get into Assassin's Creed? Like what was the process for you discovering these games and
My story is very anticlimactic, I think. The first one I ever played, and this usually surprises people, is Syndicate.
oh, interesting.
And I never finished it. I did not really enjoy it. It was like an Xbox free weekend, and I was like, oh, I've never played one of these games before. I heard about the pirate one. I thought that was good. I might as well try this one. And I didn't really jive with it.
Mhm.
I was watching White Light. He released
Ah,
a Unity video.
yes.
He brought up sort of your channel. I watched that. I'm like, wow, this game looks fun. I should play that. And played Unity using your guide content. And I'm like, oh, well, this is, actually enjoyable. And then I went back and played the older games, adopting sort of similar strategies, and then went from there where I kind of get into the more technical elements,
Right.
like how things are designed, mechanics. Well, for me, first of all, obviously, it was your Rogue Academy videos. I mean, that was like the main inspiration. A lot of the old guard in general. I mean, Messianic,
Yes.
SSJ Lang, Lin
Yes.
Lean. A lot of what I did was just, originally I had like kind of like a written script in terms of like the guides. Very old. It's around somewhere. But I literally started off saying, "Hey, you ever watch a video from any one of these people I just mentioned? You're like, how do they even do that?" I very clearly remember writing that.
That's awesome.
So in a big way, that series that I'm probably most known for the Ezio trilogy is my way of kind of giving back to a community that helped me enjoy these games a lot more and find a lot more to enjoy kind of about them in terms of analysis and gameplay.
That's really cool. That honestly is quite relatable to me. Like in a sort of similar-ish vein, like part of what inspired me to do things of my own for AC, like back when I started doing so, is that yeah, like I remembered how good it felt to discover this kind of information and this knowledge and be taught like useful tricks by other people playing these games. And then it's like that helped me enjoy the game so much that like I wanted to help other people enjoy them more to like give them that same feeling that I got. And I think you can relate to that from what you're telling me.
Part of it was, so you had a video. I think it was Ezio Trilogy Stealth Tips.
Yeah, very
It's like,
generic. Like,
yeah, it was like a very general, broad, unspecific kind of collection of tips for to apply to these games. I was like, oh well, I mean, there's kind of an open market in terms of like, yeah, specific kind of videos talking about like how these games actually work, sort of similar to your Rogue Academy series for Unity.
I think that's awesome. I remember seeing like your description and explanation of policing, and I think like at the time when people started like becoming aware of that, it really changed like how people approached various stealth situations like in AC2 and the like. Certain things so much more possible. It made certain scenarios like way easier to play, more control over like what guards would be doing.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about policing a little bit. I feel like that gets, often associated with me because AI manipulation, having guards do what you want them to do, manipulate their AI in different detection states to achieve certain outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, and very in a very
Policing, yeah.
controlled manner.
In stealth games, generally what you have is you have different states of awareness about your player character. Completely undetected, they might be aware that something is there, they might be actively investigating some sort of disturbance, they fully detected you. Assassin's Creed, by nature of it being about social stealth, that is the classic games, it's not so simple because obviously categories that we have to use in terms of what counts as detection changes, right? Because they can see you, it's just that they don't know your identity. Policing is something that is introduced in Assassin's Creed 2 and continues to exist through the Kenway saga, and then kind of a little bit in Unity and Syndicate. But what it is essentially is you perform an action that is flagged by the game as being suspicious, and it provokes basically a response from the guards where they don't realize that you're an assassin. So instead, they just kind of harass you. They push you around. They run at you. They, swear at you.
Yeah, they're like discouraging you from being like a public nuisance, basically.
Exactly. What is useful about that is you can actually have them follow you to like kind of a specific location, like a hiding spot, where you can actually isolate them from the rest of their patrol. It's really cool. I mean, the first time I saw it be used that way is, I mean, I think probably the biggest inspiration for a lot of the videos is Lynn Eileen. I
Yes.
remember like years and years ago, I saw a video from them, which was, they kind of bumped into a guard and they took them to, I think it was a bench or a well
Yeah.
to assassinate them. And I was like, I need to like experiment with this.
Yeah, yeah. It's like
Uh,
they just have this like
yeah.
orange outline over their SSI meter. Like, what's up with that, right?
And it's kind of one of those things that you get from this series that is only possible because its stealth is specifically social.
Yeah.
It's about your presence in society and how you relate to sort of everything around you within this particular social context, right? Rather than being specifically undetected.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get a mechanic like this in Splinter Cell, for
No,
example, or
no.
Thief.
Yeah. At the most, you would just get like the sort of I've seen something suspicious and I'm going to investigate in its general direction. But then if you maintain line of sight for too long, they'll detect you and enter combat with you. But in Assassin's Creed, that's not the case because, like you said, they don't know your identity. Like I think once upon a time, someone working on the series mentioned that like the concept for Assassin's Creed is something like if you were, let's say, like a killer in a movie theater, you know, no one would know that you're a killer until you did something to like give them that idea. I think policing is a mechanic that so many players latch onto, including myself, because it's like such a direct way to showcase that and to make it very visible. Indeed, like it's not something that you will see in other types of games.
Yeah, I mean, it's something very unique to this series, and also Hitman. It exists
It
in that
exists in
kind of form in
Hitman.
Hitman too. Kind of unique to this particular idea of stealth in a social setting, which is why I think it's really cool. It's like it's not something that you see, especially in this kind of, stealth is integrated usually in a very traditional line of sight, cover-based sort of sense
Yeah.
rather than kind of these more unique sort of contexts that you can get from having it be set in an urban environment.
Your focus on social stealth in Assassin's Creed, like people can probably guess at the answer and so can I, but like what made you love it to the point of like focusing so much on it across your work?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it was choreographed content from people like Messianic, who they use all these systems in these sort of ways that are very interesting and entertaining, but it makes you sort of scratch your head and ask, like, how? Is that possible?
Yeah.
I wanted to take it a bit of a step further, where, it's not just about producing interesting gameplay, it's about actually developing a theory or a philosophy of how we can actually conceptualize it.
Right, and this kind of like gives players the tools to like do that themselves and thereby engage with Assassin's Creed in a bit more of like an intentional way.
Exactly. Yeah. Part of the problem is that there's a lot of difficulty around actually applying criticism to Assassin's Creed. It's done in kind of a backwards way. Maybe this is a little off topic, but I think it's relevant.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of what happens in a lot of reviews and retrospective analyses of the older games is you have the object of analysis, AC1, AC2, Brotherhood, Revelations. The standards for analyzing the object, they're always set by the series in general.
Yeah.
How is this game relevant to the entire series or relevant to the industry? What did this game do that is relevant to how we understand the series? And to be fair, this is an important, interesting question, but it's premature, I think. What you actually have to do first is you have to actually set the standards of analysis according to the object itself, right?
Yeah.
So Assassin's Creed 1, for example, sort of the general consensus on it is that what's that one Patrice quote? It's like a toy rather than a video game. AC2 is more like a video game.
Right, which obviously hurts my
Yeah,
soul deeply, but go on.
yeah, yeah. People think that it's kind of like this early stage of the development of open world games. Yeah, it's a tech demo, right? And of course, there has been sort of this turnaround of opinion where it's like, oh, AC1 actually has all these mechanics that are, it's like a little more mechanically in depth than what people expect, right? But even that, I think, is not really sufficient enough because what happens is that there's not really any understanding of Assassin's Creed 1 as simply Assassin's Creed 1 and what it
Yes.
tried to do specifically,
Yes.
completely separate from the rest of the series, which is it tried to be an assassination game where you gather investigations diegetically, you absorb information, you perform reconnaissance, you learn about your target, and then you develop infiltration and exfiltration routes, before the mission starts. You plan out your assassinations. You actually read maps. It's trying to be sort of like an assassination simulator. And
Yeah.
it does certain things like having assassinations be set in the entire district and actually having like your targets try to escape to like a central guard tower location, which you can actually clear out beforehand. Thanks, Dr. Fahrenheit.
Yeah, Fahrenheit talks about this a
Yeah,
lot.
he really gets it because what he does is that he actually takes AC1 and he makes AC1 the standard of its own analysis,
Correct. Yeah,
right?
and that's why his analysis is often so strong. And, more often than not, he's very able to persuade people into like finding AC1 interesting when maybe they
Yes.
previously wouldn't have. And I think part of the reason why he succeeds is because he does what you're saying. Like, he makes the game itself the standard of analysis instead of like, compared to like Metal Gear Solid 5, this is not a very good stealth game, right? Like,
It's important to like kind of universalize and historicize these games in a context, but it has to proceed organically. You start with each game on its own particular merits and try to see what it does completely irrespective of Assassin's Creed, but as itself, purely as itself. And then from there, without kind of trying to crowd this game into a particular category of what Assassin's Creed is or should be or shouldn't be, then you go from there.
yeah.
You go a posteriori rather than a priori.
Right.
You start with the object itself before applying anything to it, and then the categories of analysis come from the object itself dynamically.
Yeah, it emerges like in the process of looking at that.
Kind of what I try to do. Because I think what we've done is we've kind of failed to really conceptualize what social stealth is and what it can be and even what it was because we've set these expectations of what a game or what Assassin's Creed can or could or should be without actually analyzing what it was to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed this a fair bit. It gets harder nowadays as well because in the talk I had with Jay, we said something along the lines of, we know a good game when we see it, or like we know something is successful, or we know something is enjoyable when we see it, like when we experience it. Whenever there is distance from being able to perceive something, it gets harder and harder to conceptualize things around it. And the way this ties to Assassin's Creed nowadays is that social stealth is not much of a thing in these games currently. Like,
Yeah.
even when they gesture at it, it's ineffectual at best. You would be better served like ignoring it and trying not to make it work because you'll probably just make yourself miserable. But the result of that is that players and viewers and thinkers are very far removed from social stealth being something that is right in front of us and that's like contemporary. If we want to examine it, we do have to go back, and not many people are as willing to do that as they are willing to like look at a game that came out like this year or whatever, right? It's always the case.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you're exactly correct. That's kind of the frustration that I have in terms of the way these games get talked about. Oftentimes Assassin's Creed is like this sort of lowbrow fast food annual release franchise. Why would you bother looking in deeper to its mechanics?
Right.
But the social stealth system that these early games had and the design that went into them, kind of revolutionary
It
in ways that
was.
people don't understand.
It was arguably too cerebral, and that's why in
Yeah.
order for the series to like achieve, some increased level of mainstream appeal, which they always kind of were, to be fair.
Yeah, of course.
But in the further pursuit of that, like I don't think it's a coincidence that these aspects were kind of shed, because it's difficult to explain this to people. It's difficult to make people find it cool and to like care about it.
Exactly. And I think kind of our job is to explain what was lost and why we should mourn that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
why it's cool and why you should care.
And then
And I think
hopefully
maybe, yeah,
it would precipitate a return of some kind. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, which we were talking about, but
yeah,
certainly some expression of social stealth as a concept systemized through play, I think would be amazing to have return in whatever form is appropriate.
yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I'm excited because we're kind of seeing this with our core. Developers are starting to kind of understand the certain subset of players don't want it to be this, purely functional kind of system of navigation. They want to have a degree of expression and freedom and risk associated with it. They want to have movement that is actually gamified
Yeah.
rather than being purely functional. So I'm hoping maybe something similar happens with social stealth, but I think it would be good to get into why we should care about it and what it is and what exactly is like so innovative or ambitious about the systems as they appeared in the older games.
Yeah.
This is maybe controversial. I kind of pretty much out of hand reject, this idea of the three pillars.
I think the three pillars were useful at the time,
Yeah.
but I think adhering to them too much almost makes it like, this may be controversial. I think adhering to
Yeah.
the three pillars too much makes them subject to warping. Because
Yes.
like what you see in something like, when Origins came out, they tried to use this language in its marketing where it's like, oh, we still have combat, we still have stealth, and by it can still climb over anything. And it's like, okay, but like that's not what we actually like mean when we crave these like facets of play.
Yes.
Right? Like and so
Yes, exactly.
you see what I mean? Like this adherence to like the three pillars just kind of gives them a convenient way to like twist that and be like, oh, look, we still have this somehow, and it's like, no, not really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think really the source of that issue is that the language of saying three pillars,
Yeah.
stealth, combat, navigation, it makes them sound as if they're completely separate, segregated systems that just kind of exist on their own with no real actual interaction.
Right, and that's something that especially I think made AC1 and AC2 so interesting and so powerful, is that these systems did actually all flow back and forth like into each other.
They're integrated into a whole. They're all these systems and subsystems within them. Crowd blending interacts with corpse detection, interacts with investigation behaviors, interacts with civilian reactions, interacts with hiding spots. Assassin's Creed, the older games especially, were not just, you have the system for movement and the system for stealth and the system for combat. They are integrated organs connected by a design philosophy. This entire holistic system is the social stealth. It's
Yes.
everything all at
Yes.
once.
Because that's the thing, like when people say social stealth, like I think there's this idea that like when we discuss social stealth, we're not talking about combat. Like when we discuss social stealth, we're not talking about parkour, but like that's not the case. They are factors in social stealth.
In the classic games, the way that assassinations work, obviously you have low profile and high profile. High profile can be used, in accordance to different principles of movement, right? Different states of movement, rather. Low profile, meanwhile, silent, difficult to detect outside of a certain radius. The main thing that's really important about them is that when you assassinate someone in low profile, the NPCs around them cannot actually detect that person as being a corpse until a
Yes.
few seconds later,
Yes.
right?
You're buying yourself time.
And what that means is that a key element of how social stealth works in these older games is constant repositioning
Yeah.
using parkour. You do low profile assassination, and then you can switch from street to rooftop to get a vantage point. You can move around to a hiding spot that they will inevitably investigate because of their investigation behaviors, and so on. There's this constant economy of trading advantages. This is game design. This is like what makes the game a game,
Yeah.
you know?
I was gonna briefly mention as well, like, I love how you said, like, an economy of advantages and disadvantages because, I was literally just about to bring up, like, one of the things that makes the profile system so compelling to me in classic AC is that you're giving something up, whatever stance you exist in. In low
Yes.
profile, like, your actions have lower range, you're slower. This is what you're giving up. And then, like, in high profile, yes, I can fucking nuke some dude several
Yeah.
meters away from me. Of course, this creates, like, a massive, like, detection splash around me. Now I have to deal with that. What do I value more in that moment? What if the enemy is about to flee and, like, leave behind guarded area, right? Like, maybe
Yeah.
I need to kill him right now. Maybe it's worth hitting him with the high profile, like, dashing assassination so that I can just get rid of him right now and, like, not have to deal with infiltrating the area that he's in, right? But again, like, you do pay a cost for that, right?
I mean, let's actually talk about this idea of economizing game design. I kind of mentioned before, elsewhere, cybernetics,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, like, what do we
Economics
mean
and
by that?
cybernetics. Cybernetics is essentially sort of this name for like the field of computer science in its early stages. Study data inputs and then outputs and the ways in which that feedback is received into another input, a feedback loop. And I promise this is going to make sense in a few minutes, but you're just going to have to bear with
I
me.
can already tell how, so just keep going.
Yeah. So this is a field of science that was for a time very popular in the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
amongst sort of these sort of reform-minded techno-optimist cyber communists, basically. So the Soviet Union at one point had this bureau for economic planning called Gosplan, right?
Yeah.
And the idea of Gosplan was that they would use essentially different techniques to optimize economic planning, to get rid of its inefficiencies, to bypass markets. And the idea that they had was to actually incorporate computers into essentially algorithmically planning the economy. Soviet economic planning would have been simultaneously centralized and decentralized into essentially these smaller regional economies that input information into Gosplan. There's sort of an output that creates feedback, which is then received again, and these different regional economies are all interconnected by the system, which then integrates it into a larger national economy. Interlocking economic systems within the Soviet Union. Theoretically, what it would have done is it would have abolished the need for big bureaucratic state. Probably the main reason why this project failed, this early version of the Soviet internet, is because obviously the bureaucrats don't want to lose the basis of their status as elites. Their function would be superseded by this algorithmic economic planning. It was basically strangled in red tape. But the reason why I bring this up is that I think it's actually kind of a useful metaphor for game design and actually understanding social stealth relative to Assassin's Creed. Early sort of cybernetics articles basically describing how cybernetics works like the human nervous system. Sort of all of these actuators in the nervous system would receive input that would go back to the brain, and then the brain would then make decisions that go back to the nervous system, and then there's like a continuous feedback loop of like, oh, where are my limbs? What are they doing? What do they need to do? The same thing in video games. We have to economize them. That's where the gameplay actually comes, because you take this interactive piece of software which has no gameplay, and then you have to figure out how do you make a player perform interesting decisions in interesting scenarios. How do you actually introduce risk and incentive
And I think what's really fascinating about this is like it is meaningful to do so because we see time and time again that players are very willing to not do, the allegedly most interesting thing. It is commendable when games do genuinely put their best foot forward and try to encourage or push that kind of behavior. I mean, it goes back to even just like board game design or tabletop game design. It is basically pure rule set. As such, like it becomes increasingly important, especially there, to like make sure that everything is functional and like interlocked correctly because you don't really have like fancy graphics or sound or whatever to like obfuscate, hey, is the most enjoyable and most engaging behavior arising in the course of play. A lot of the times in games, like it kind of doesn't. Players are very stubborn about like playing in a boring way because it's effective.
Like, I think maybe what would be useful as kind of an exercise is maybe walking us through maybe like a typical scenario of how social self might work in AC2, and then relating it back to the sort of Gosplan metaphor. So let's do that. I think that'd be fun.
That would be fun, yeah.
So let's say this. You have a normal situation where Ezio is incognito, right? That means policing is on the table. Blends in a crowd, walks up, uses blend aid time to do an invisible low-profile assassination on a patrol. Then he walks away, and then he sits on a bench, right, before this guard collapses. Already we have a few things going on. On the macro level, the state of his notoriety is that he doesn't have any, right, which affects guard behaviors. So policing is on the table, for example. But on the micro level, what you're doing is essentially you're interacting with civilian AI, right? You are relying on the fact that they are in a neutral state that is indifferent to Ezio and the world around them. They are not disturbed. You are then using blend fade time, which then interacts with the low profile assassination system in a way that it produces a completely invisible assassination, which gives you time to reposition.
Yeah.
You are trading, I'll kind of explain what you're trading. The guard collapses, which means that all of those blend groups that you were relying on for cover are now dispersed.
Yes.
They can no longer be used to blend in.
It means where you make the kill, like, matters.
Yeah, it matters. Trading your position for performing an objective, right, which is to kill this guard. The guards investigate the corpse. What's interesting about the Ezio trilogy is that the way investigation behaviors are designed, it's also very economic. If you're caught unawares, then guards can very easily flush you out, right? They disperse crowds, they check hiding spots. But if you know how the system works, you know that they split up to investigate hiding spots.
Yeah.
So one of those guards will walk over to your bench, and then you will do a bench assassination to silently hide their corpse. But then you've also lost your hiding spot.
Yeah, so now you have to reposition again.
So let's say you're in the line of sight of another guard. He performs policing behaviors on you because it's incognito. You're not notorious, right? He doesn't know you're an assassin yet. So you lead him to a haystack, and then you kill him, and then you can do whatever you want to do to the last remaining guard. So do you see how in sort of this scenario that would take maybe like a minute, right? We've made like dozens of little micro decisions because of the ways in which these systems, that is, civilian AI, investigation behaviors, low profile assassinations, repositioning, movement, they all interlock in such a way that it creates this minute-long encounter. And that's not even going into level design, right? Or talking about tools and how they modify the actual economics of the situation, what actual decisions you can make, the way they modify this. The reason why this metaphor is also useful is because of the way it actually exposes the problems in this system.
Yes, right? Yes.
Which is that the balancing is all wrong.
Yeah, like many players will never feel an incentive to do so because there is insufficient pressure and burden for just deciding to fight everyone.
Essentially, the ways in which all these systems on the micro level, like the very minute technical stuff, like a guard sees this and then he does this, or a civilian sees this and you can no longer blend with them, etc. And then on the macro level, which is like notoriety, for example, they interact in these interesting ways which could create scenarios. You could just do 2 low profile double assassinations and you're done. That's it.
Yeah.
You're done in 5 seconds. On paper, you have a lot of these systems. I mean, I think as a community, this community, we focused a lot on kind of trying to valorize and renegotiate general consensus on what these individual systems are like. And we've done a good job at that, I think. We have kind of, I think, changed the consensus on parkour, for example. We have done a lot of analysis on combat and its fear systems. We've done a lot on stealth. The problem is that I think what we haven't done enough of as a community is talking about how these systems combine into a interlocking, integral, integrated whole.
Yeah, I think that's the next step, and it's hopefully we start to see that a little bit more in the coming years.
I hope so too, because to me, I think the way I see sort of the developers, it's not really fair for me to talk about the newer games. I haven't really played them. I'm not the audience for them.
Yeah.
But at least to talk about them a little bit in context of what I'm talking about, to me, it's clear that they still see this as kind of, oh, you have different pillars of gameplay that you can emphasize or de-emphasize according to the situation. And where it's really bad is, you just have this out of a sense of obligation for what Assassin's Creed kind of should be. Mirage social stuff, for example. You can correct the record on this because like I haven't played the game. I just happen to know a little bit about it from like osmosis of like other people in this community playing it. Ostensibly, it's like similar to the Ezio trilogy. Low profile assassinations not entirely consistent. There's no blend fade time. There's a situation in the Ezio trilogy where it's actually really dangerous to use blend fade time assassinations, right? They're completely invisible, they're very safe. But when you're notorious, you're giving up your invisibility in exchange for killing this one guy.
Yeah.
Which means suddenly now you're exposed. You don't get that decision making in Barrage because it has no blend fade time. The level design is not really there. I mean, the level design in AC1 and the Ezio trilogy is designed in such a way that guard patrols are positioned in very specific ways relative to hiding spots and crowds so that you can take advantage of them. Parkour, you can do a low profile blend assassination and then reposition using a parkour starter, right, to rapidly get up to the rooftops, to get out of that situation entirely and reposition yourself more safely.
Yeah, taking stock of where that's located so that you can access it like immediately like becomes part of the gameplay, and that's I think something that we can touch on at some point, but a lot of the gameplay in older AC actually just happens like in your head. And I think that's why, it didn't really catch on in a way that, we perhaps might have hoped. Would people consider reading a map like gameplay? I mean, like I would, but probably not everyone would.
That's the problem. It kind of goes back to we apply categories of analysis to an object that are foreign to it. We don't actually take this idea of reading a map as gameplay on its own merit, right? We don't actually analyze it according to itself. We just apply, oh, well, what is a game supposed to be? It's a very vague and shallow notion of what gameplay looks like and feels like.
And then
Right.
anything that doesn't meet that is like to be discarded, basically.
Precisely. Yeah, I think that's the issue. I mean, one of the things you see in Revelations, because it has eagle sense, is you can actually see guard patrol routes. And you can see, actually, using the eagle vision in that game, how the guard patrol routes are designed relative to hiding spots and crowds.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's such a cool feature because it exposes something that has always been the case, like in all the games. It's just that now it's like surface to you if you want to look at it.
Now it's visible. Exactly. It's like what used to be unconscious is now very much conscious, right? It's kind of like the invention of the camera.
Yeah.
It created this kind of optical unconsciousness. It made it conscious because now we hyperfixate on little micro expressions and little expressions of body language that we didn't hyperfixate on before. But that kind of exposes how simplified the stealth level design when it comes to urban spaces has become. Because in older games there was this idea of everything is totalized into one big design philosophy. The entire city is designed block by block in this particular way that I've described, where every block is a stealth layout, not just a parkour layout, a stealth layout too, complete with benches and crowds and cover, factions that you can use, sight lines, parkour starters. Patrols are sort of positioned in a way relative to all these other things. What happens is that the later you go in the series, especially starting with AC4 and then more and more, is that instead stealth areas are designated.
Yes.
They become cordoned off from everywhere else.
It's just
Yeah, you
It's
move through the city and then you go to the place where you do the stealth.
exactly
There's no interaction between these two things.
that is something that has like long disappointed me, and it's something that I think, again, Fahrenheit talks about this a lot, where like in
Yeah.
AC1 especially, the world is the play space in a way that is very
Yes.
like natural and very like you don't have these like instanced areas essentially where they behave differently than the rest of the game. But if you take something like a restricted area in like, I don't know, like Unity or whatever, or the newer games or whatever, that's not actually behaving according to the rules of the rest of the world. It really betrays the struggle for Assassin's Creed to actually like do what it wants to do and also deliver the experience that we want it to deliver, because why do you need sectioned off restricted areas in order to make functional stealth gameplay? Like, doesn't that kind of say something about the state of like general stealth gameplay the rest of the time?
Like I said, it's like the pillars problem. Everything is sectioned off and segregated from one another rather than being integrated.
If I were to be charitable, I guess part of like how it maybe came about, and again, I have no idea if this is the case, this is just conjecture, but the idea
Yeah.
is that like a restricted area is kind of a space where notoriety is overlaid geographically onto you, basically.
Yes.
So like even if you're not notorious, even if you're incognito, in order to access those mechanics that, flavor the experience differently, they like geographically make you notorious like in
Yes.
restricted areas. And I guess like that is very useful, it's good shorthand, but I do think they rely on it over much.
It creates a problem where it puts it into people's heads that despite the fact that the cities are designed to have stealth in them, to have genuinely interesting and engaging stealth encounters in them, that the place where the gameplay happens is the mission,
Yeah, exactly.
which I hate.
I
I
hate that
hate it
so
because the
much.
missions follow their own rules too, especially in AC2. AC2 starts this trend of like, you have a mission and then the way detection works or what you're allowed to do is specific to that mission in a way that AC1 always very consistently against.
Yeah, AC1
Right?
very deliberately avoids doing that.
Its rules are very consistent. What works here is going to work here as well. Every target will run off to a guard tower that you can anticipate. Obviously, the set of obstacles and the level design and all of that, whatever gimmicks are different between assassinations. The rules of what you can do, the rules of where you can actually engage with the gameplay, always consistent.
Yeah, and it's what makes learning to read space in AC1 like so rewarding in a way I don't think any subsequent game has like recaptured.
No, 100%. Like again, it's this problem of we tend to analyze these games with arbitrary definitions of what a game is. I mean, have you noticed in like every retrospective analysis in Brotherhood, the thing that they emphasize the most is like content distribution?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm talking about. It's like we're not talking about what makes this game a game, right? How is it gamified? What they instead talk about are the trends that they set and how they exist relative to those trends. The Ubisoft open world formula,
Yeah, like
right?
Brotherhood is a very like, generically good video game trademark.
Yes.
And you can easily compare it to like Far Cry or like, I don't know, Shadow of Mordor or whatever, and
And
like any
everyone does.
yeah, and everyone does. Yeah, because like
Yeah.
it's right there.
Yeah, but there's not really any actual understanding of what is Brotherhood trying to accomplish with its systems. What are the contradictions between what it tries to accomplish with its systems, which are very ambitious, just like AC2,
Yeah.
versus how
Having
it
10
presents
billion
itself?
HP.
Exactly. I've said it before, I think, in a comment somewhere. I think it was on a So Says Jay video. I mean, I think it is true that these games fail to meet their own potential, but we also fail to meet their potential as critics,
I would
right?
agree. Yeah.
Because our definition of what is important about these games relative to themselves, relative to Assassin's Creed, relative to the industry at large, is so
It's a little
bullshit.
underdeveloped. Yeah.
Very. There's no actual intellectual, analytical content to any kind of analysis applied to these games. And that's, like, I think, a big problem about the way that they're talked about. The discussion we're having, you're never going to get in a video outside of really, really niche fandom subcultures. Completely contrary to kind of the way that everyone else defines how video games work. No one wants to conceptualize a video game as economics, essentially, right?
Yeah.
But not having a theory of games and game design to actually kind of use as a toolbox fails these games. I think we have failed these games in a pretty historic way,
Yeah, and
which is
specifically,
quite sad.
I think so too, and specifically like one that is applicable to Assassin's Creed to make its uniqueness be visible, right? Which is also like very very tough because again, it's quote unquote easy to espouse Assassin's Creed in the sense of like, oh, is it being like a generically good video game? It's not so easy to examine it in a way where it's like, is it achieving like Assassin's Creed things? And people also don't always agree on like what that is, and that's part of the reason why, because that's uncomfortable.
It is, yeah.
It's weird to think that way. It's uncomfy to think that way. I touched on this with so says Jay. People are very kind of allergic, evasive, and avoidant of engaging with Assassin's Creed in a very like serious way because it's like uncool to do that or whatever. But if you look at like, I don't know, like your average From Software game or like
Yeah.
survival horror games, right? Or just like Disco Elysium, right? Like if you look at any
Yeah.
of those, the gravitas and the level of analysis and like the shape of analysis is very different. And yet like these are all games. Like is Assassin's Creed not a video game like the rest of these? Like what's the
It's
problem?
just that those games gamify themselves in different ways. Like you mentioned Disco Elysium.
Yeah.
It gamifies its text.
Yes.
Text is the gameplay, and that's what's cool about it.
Yes, and it constantly leans on what's cool about it. And if you don't like that, then you simply just don't play the game. Like it's not for you.
It's to me, it's like what you constantly see is fans, and oftentimes, unfortunately, aficionados, critics, the industry. What they take from these games, from Assassin's Creed, from the older games, is not any of the innovative, ambitious, the downright revolutionary ideas that they had about totalizing stealth in an urban context, making stealth truly social, and learning from the ways in which, they failed to do that, but also the ways in which they succeeded. Instead, they just take content distribution.
Yeah.
How do we distribute side content? Cinematics, have a story, blah, blah, have all this, blah, blah, blah. None of the actually interesting stuff.
And I think
Right.
what's really fascinating to me about that is, when the comparisons to Hitman start rolling in, it does kind of like only go so far because when you look at, I don't know, like a Hitman mission, Hitman is not an open world. Like the reason why people latched onto and got so attached and like hold with a death grip onto the whole black box assassination concept is that that does kind of ape Hitman a little bit, but like Assassin's Creed's strength was never that. Like Hitman didn't give you an open world that constantly behaved by its own principles. Every single mission in Hitman is its own little restricted area, so to speak. And then like you play by the rules of that mission. But like Assassin's Creed trying to graft that onto itself and to kind of like again like distribute content in that way by like chunking it off like that, it doesn't leverage like what makes Assassin's Creed unique, which is that yes, like it is a world, its processes proceed, you engage with those processes in a way that is always consistent regardless of your context. It doesn't matter if you're in a mission, it doesn't matter if you're free roaming, right? Like the game doesn't really make a distinction. The game is the game.
You took the words out of my mouth. I mean, like, thank you. I feel like validated now.
But like doesn't it just make sense?
It's like what makes Hitman cool is that it's like you have these very intricate, carefully designed specific missions, right, where you have a lot of routes through them.
Yes, and
What
they
makes
can do
Assassin's
that.
Creed cool, yeah. What makes Assassin's Creed cool is that you have an entire open world that you can interact with in all these dynamic ways, where all these systems and detections feed into each other, into cascading series of feedback loops.
Yeah.
Right, in a way that Hitman cannot do.
Yeah, exactly. It
It
can't.
doesn't have parkour.
Yeah.
Right.
And then likewise, Assassin's Creed will never be as good as Hitman at giving us that like, black box assassination, that Hitman mission.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
And yet that's what they
Its own thing.
Exactly, but like that's what it's like so often tried to be, even with the best of intentions, but it's like no, like just go back to having like a properly systemized world and letting us interact with it in like free form ways. It's why like Metal Gear Solid 5 is so close to my heart, even though it also has, to an extent, like sectioned off missions that do impose limits on you. But like it's kind of one of the closest things to the way Assassin's Creed functions, and the other one is Death Stranding, by the way, feels so similar to that, where like the game is the game, the world is the world. It's always going to operate by the same rules, and then things that you engaged with earlier may have an effect on your context now, right? Like that's something Hitman can never do, but that's something AC1 does all the time. That's something
Yeah.
Death Stranding does all the time.
What a lot of people don't understand about AC1, again, Fahrenheit, thank you. If you're watching this, love you, buddy. You're great. What AC1 does that Hitman can never do, you have this sort of section which seems like it's a cordoned off stealth area. Your target can escape that area to the district's guard tower. The mission spills out into the open world in a way that it is impossible for Hitman to do. This sort of like, again, the Gosplan metaphor. It's about interlinking all these small things into something regional and national. You know, it's like you're taking the stuff which seems separate but is interlinked in a vital way, and then you're expanding the actual, I guess you could say, scale of where the mission takes place.
Yeah.
Hitman can't do that. Assassin's Creed can, and the fact that it has not really leveraged that since the first game is tragic.
Yeah, it is. I miss it. I want it. Like, I want to play Assassin's Creed games that do this kind of thing. I would enjoy playing that so much. It's why I keep bringing up Death Stranding, because I think part of what we're getting at is Assassin's Creed gives the player the ability to, how do I say, to wield time in a way that, like, these other games do not. What you do, 2 hours ago in Hitman doesn't matter, because 2 hours later, you're playing a completely different mission that has nothing to do with the one you were just at. What you do 2 hours ago in Death Stranding, like if you place a structure or a bridge, or you put down a mailbox for yourself so that you can like store cargo without being attacked for it, right? Like what you did 2 hours ago, now 2 hours later when you're playing a mission that happens to cross through that space, well, now your decisions earlier do in fact like affect that. And Assassin's Creed can be very similar in that way. Like the learnings you did by scouting out this souk or this like palace or whatever on your own time, like during free roam, now you know the placements of things. Now you know the general like architectural flow. And so when you're running, either chasing a target or fleeing their guards, right? Like you are less panicked because you've seen this before. And like that too is gameplay, like setting up your mind to like be calmer later. Like that is gameplay.
I don't know what a literal example of that is. In AC1, Talal, I think, if you set up, if you, saved citizens in the path of where he's going to flee to the guard tower, and there's like a map that actually shows you where he might flee to, the route he might take. If you actually save citizens along that route, they will actually, the vigilantes will actually catch him for like an easy kill for you to make.
Yeah.
Right? Very literal. Like the actions that you take, from this point, like maybe like 30 minutes to an hour ago, now directly carry over and have consequences.
Yes.
This is the shit that like makes these games cool and can make them cool, but they don't lead on.
And that's the thing. I think what's so heartbreaking about it is not simply Assassin's Creed that these things are absent from. You don't typically see this in gaming in general.
Yes.
And that's why, again, I keep gassing up Death Stranding. Like, that's why, because that's one of the very few games that actually like does shit like that.
It leverages its own medium.
It makes the game being open world actually matter. Like the open world is not just a vehicle for like putting down content. The open world becomes something that you push and pull on in a way that a non-open world game cannot do.
The open world, which is so vital to the way that the way all these different feedback loops positioned themselves to each other, right? They were tied together in terms of their design and their function, and then the parkour exists as a bridge to all of them, right? The problem is that more and more, as people began to understand Assassin's Creed is simply being about its content rather than its systems, what you get is that the open world becomes more and more empty. It ceases to be actual because there's no real gameplay happening, right? It's just clusters of gameplay scattered across the map that you go to.
As people say, it becomes
like a random event that happens, but like
it's
really the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah, as people tend to say, like it just becomes a glorified level select screen, which sometimes like I hear that criticism of things and it hurts to hear, but like I also can't disagree with it. And it doesn't have to be that way, and it wasn't always that way.
AC1 was revolutionary in how it used its open world and stealth and parkour and combat together in the context of this open world. The way it designed its assassinations in the context of the open world. What we saw instead was just that it was sort of this early attempt at how to distribute content, and that it failed to distribute that content because it's repetitive or whatever. What the game tried to actually achieve on its own merits, what it tried to conceptualize something far beyond what people thought were possible with games, with open worlds, with stealth, with parkour, with combat. We just kind of ignored that. And they tried again with AC2 with more restrictions this time. And again, we ignored it. The actual cool stuff that makes these games awesome and unique has just been discarded.
Yeah, it's hard to make people care about them. Ideally, the game itself should have done a better job at it, and then because it didn't, like we're still paying for it like 20 years later.
Part of it is the game are the games. It's like we've talked a lot about the problem of tutorialization. I don't want to harp on that because, you know, smarter people than me have talked about it.
I've come to realize tutorialization is only like part of the issue though, and then
it's only part of it.
The rest is also just incentives. Like especially when I play, I've been playing more arcade games recently. You know, like shmups and the like, and it just I don't know. There's just something so pure about
they're economically tight.
Yes, exactly.
Good economies.
Yeah.
You know, Assassin's Creed, those early games, they're not.
No. Yeah.
And
it lets players ignore like what's good about them, basically.
Yeah, it's like you don't have to make these interesting decisions. I mean, sure, part of the problem is that you don't know you can make those interesting decisions. Yeah, I mean, that is a problem. The other problem is just that, you know, there's no reason to change how you conceptualize anything.
Exactly.
There's no need to actually change how you think.
Like I've been playing Metaphor Refantasio recently, which is a JRPG that is like quite hard compared to most of the genre, and I am indeed playing it on hard. And it's killing me sometimes, and it's like it's frustrating and it pisses me off, but it forces me to like learn and understand things that I could be doing. And then because it's forcing me to like learn and understand those things, it's making me aware that those things exist. Because as long as I remain unaware of them, I will keep hitting that game over screen, right? And then the same thing with like, I'm just trying to think, like it's just so important. Like, let me give a recent example. I recently played Trails in the Sky First, which is another JRPG, and part of the reason I do value JRPGs is just like they are quite mechanically tight if you play them on like high difficulty settings.
Yeah.
And you know, every decision kind of matters. So when I started Trails in the Sky First, I actually played on normal. And when I played on normal, I was like losing some fights, I was dying, I didn't really understand like why it was happening. And this is not a game where you can like grind very much. Like it basically like docks your XP gain if you are roughly at like the power level you should be per area. So like you can't really cheese it so much in like numerically. There are other ways, but not numerically. And so because of that, I would lose some fights because I just wasn't understanding how combat was meant to flow. And so at this point, like I had kind of like an option, like a decision. I was like, I considered dropping it down to easy because, you know, this would help me progress. But instead of dropping it down to easy, I actually did the crazy thing and I raised it to hard. Because my reasoning was, if I play this on hard, my poor decisions will be punished with greater clarity. And then I will understand the game better, and then it will become easier. And that's what happened. This idea of like, games should, you know, allow themselves to be difficult and to push the player, because that way they will encourage the player to discover that they can even do these things to begin with.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, one of the things that people have to learn is their experience is not essentially real. You know, you have to learn how to become alienated from your experience to actually go beyond it into some form of speculative thinking, right?
Right.
It's essentially what we're talking about, where it's like the common way that Assassin's Creed is presented is as this generically good game franchise. But you have to become dissatisfied with that before you actually realize, oh, wow, you know, there's all these ideas about game design that are like totally, completely untapped, right? It's an untapped gold mine.
Because I mean, other games aren't doing it, but Assassin's Creed isn't
Yeah,
doing it either. So like, what's up, right?
it's not doing it anymore,
Not
right?
anymore. Yeah.
Like people are too afraid to kind of have pushback, but it's this feeling of like being alienated from the game, right? That forces you to reconceptualize how you think about it, right? And then you learn to appreciate it in new ways. Assassin's Creed is generically good. Then you start to get into it more and you see all these critiques about how, oh, well, all these systems and mechanics, they don't really, there's no real depth. It's just kind of like whatever, you play the game, it's easy, do that. But then you have to go deeper and then you realize, wait, there's like all this stuff I could engage with.
Yeah.
It's just under the surface.
The depth
I'm
is
not explaining this
there.
very well.
Yeah, like the
Yeah.
depth is there, but the player has like seldom any reason to actually like reach for it.
Games, I think, as with any kind of art form, should be alienating. You know, it's this process of alienation and then reconciliation that actually makes art engaging,
Dude,
right?
Silksong beat the shit out of me when I played that game.
Ninja Gaiden beat the shit out of me. 2 is beating the shit out of me right now. It forces you to learn. It's like the journey I had with Ninja Gaiden Black was like kind of incredible.
Yeah, and now you see games in a different way.
I mean, let's talk about Ninja Gaiden Black a little bit. Its own
I love
maybe
that
sort of
game.
economics. I love it.
I
One of
love
my
that
favorites
game.
ever. But let's talk about, you know, the way Ninja Gaiden Black balances itself, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the difficulty climb. It's a very particularly carefully, delicately balanced game. And obviously it's like it generally doesn't have the reputation of being that. It's like generally the reputation is just its pure sadism on the part of Itagaki, rest in peace. What I really loved about that game is the way it paced its own difficulty,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Where you would get a challenge that seems insurmountable, and then you grow, you improve, you learn something new. You learn the enemy's move sets, and then you continue, and then you apply that knowledge to harder challenges, and then you struggle against that, and you continue. But that carries over between difficulties, right? The
Yes.
enemies that you start fighting at the end of like hard become kind of more normal for very hard, and so on. They throw in a bunch of surprises so that it doesn't get boring. But the way that the difficulties are balanced are such that the game is literally teaching you,
Yes.
always teaching you. It alienates you, it kicks your ass, but in doing so, it forces you to get better in a way that like so many games fail to, and it's the most fun thing ever.
Yeah, like this is something that I've been thinking about recently, again, because I've been playing more RPGs where, like, sometimes in an RPG, you'll be faced with a situation where it's like, my current setup is not
Yeah.
appropriate to deal with this. And so you would then, like, pivot to a different setup, but this setup is weaker. And so, like, it's numerically weaker because you haven't spent as much time, growing it.
Yeah.
But because it is the correct solution, or at least a very effective solution, it being numerically weaker is okay because you can still win with it because you're answering in the way that the game wants you to,
Yeah, you
essentially.
actually have the proper verbs
Exactly.
to
But
actually, take advantage of the situation.
but then what happens is twofold. One, you become aware, oh, this is good against this kind of situation if I ever meet it again in the future. And number two, because you fought with that setup, it has leveled up and gained strength. And so the next time you encounter that situation, not only do you have the awareness of what's good against it is, a little bit stronger now. And so you feel like, rewarded in two ways. It's I don't know, it's just so interesting. It's so fascinating. But yeah, Ninja Gaiden reminds me a lot of that, where like you meet something the first time and it's like really hard. But then after you
Yeah.
beat it once, not only do you feel good about having beat it, you now know how to respond to similar scenarios in the future.
Eventually, once you reach Master Ninja, that level of execution required, it's like a reasonable demand from the game. It trained you. You know how to do this. Now you just have to execute,
Yeah,
right? That's what Assassin's Creed really should be, I think,
I think so too.
where it trains you to think, to reconceptualize itself, right?
Yeah.
According to its own terms. No more sort of definitions of what, Assassin's Creed should be just according to whatever subjective opinion. The game should force you to reconceptualize itself in accordance to its own terms.
I think that's a very Assassin's Creed thing to pursue as well. Like, we know what the animus does. We know what the whole
Yeah.
concept behind it is, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
that that concept resonates very
Yeah.
strongly with the
Leading
idea
effect
of.
in real life.
I didn't even have to say it.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just this idea of nothing is true, everything is permitted. Let's take it as a
Yes.
design principle because,
I
for all
know.
intents and purposes, that's what it
That's
was,
what it was. Yeah, the idea
right?
is you come to Assassin's Creed from having like played other games, and then it doesn't function like other games, and it's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
so weird. It doesn't feel comfortable, right? Like,
The problem is that it breaks so many boundaries in ways that is like, Assassin's Creed 1 specifically. It breaks so many boundaries of like what should and should not be possible or accepted. For example, the idea that, a target can leave a mission area to go
yeah,
somewhere else in the open world,
like
right?
that's
That's like
crazy.
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Today, that's like still like no way they came up with that in 2007, right?
Exactly. Like, still, like, I think even just
Yeah.
just Phantom Pain basically even does something
Yeah.
remotely similar.
But it's like the problem is that AC1 is so often let down by the fact that we judge it according to the standards of what games in general should look like. So all of this weird boundary pushing experimental crazy shit that makes the game awesome
Yeah, most players
is
don't even
just like
perceive
pushed
it.
aside.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pushed aside by like everyone,
Yeah.
even by Assassin's Creed itself, and it sucks.
It does suck. I miss it. I not only just miss it, I miss like what it represented and what it stood for. And that's why,
Yeah.
whenever I talk about, hey, like I want Assassin's Creed to feel like Assassin's Creed again, obviously that is like the most low-hanging fruit like opinion you can possibly reach for if you're an AC fan. But I do hold it in my heart because what I mean is I don't need it to be a carbon copy of AC1. I just need it to
Yeah.
give me the same feeling, And there are many ways to achieve that. It just chooses to achieve none of them.
To me, I think the best way to make AC feel AC again is to just make it boundary pushing in a way that like completely deconstructs what a video game could be,
Yeah.
like AC1,
And
you know?
especially because AC1 also did this with its narrative and its
Yeah,
characters as well. It's all part of the holistic experience. Like, Assassin's Creed 1 is a story that, like, when you play it, like, it makes you uncomfortable. It talks about things that, like, depending on who you are, like, maybe you don't want to hear about. And I think, like, that's something that Assassin's Creed has been so almost like embarrassed of itself to try and do ever again. Like, where is the game that, like, I don't know, like whenever I hear people online be like, oh, like this woke bullshit or whatever, it's like, buddy, like
yeah,
if you went back to 2007 and you saw the kind of like shit
yeah. Like
AC1
this
was
game
doing,
is about the war on terror. Like, I mean, come on,
yes,
it's
like
so obviously about that.
exactly, it's one of those things where you look at it, those memes where it's like, oh, they couldn't make this in 2026, right? Like, it
Yeah,
really gives you that feeling where it's like, damn, they had balls, what the hell? Right?
yeah.
Like,
Part of the identity of like Assassin's Creed 1, if you look at it specifically, without the context of the rest of the
yeah,
series,
like
is
no
that
other
it's
game exists, like,
transgressive.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly,
it's
yes.
transgressive. It's transgressive about like what a story should be about. It's transgressive in terms of what a game it should be,
Yeah,
right? That's what
exactly.
makes it cool.
That is what makes it cool. That's what makes it feel like Assassin's Creed to me. Like that transgressiveness, that idea of like you're playing something that is willing to make you uncomfortable, that's willing to
Yeah,
make you think about, games, but also willing to make you think about like what kind of stories are we allowed to put in a video game that's going to be played by like, presumably teenagers. I think that there's something very like magical and very special about that. I also do miss like I miss when these stories were willing to talk about religion and persecution and like information control and censorship and all of this stuff that like
yeah,
nowadays when you bring it up to someone online it's like, oh, this topic is too heavy for a video game, this topic is too big for a video game. But it's like, no, it's not. Like, you can write
it's
about
not.
what
Yeah.
you have free will. Like, you can literally write whatever you want.
Assassin's Creed, in terms of its stories, it's like they have not been willing to be so transgressive. Like AC1 is a very topical game. It's
Yes.
like its entire story. Obviously, the modern day has it's like all the popular conspiracy theories of the day. It's
Yes.
like the modern day is just that,
I think
right?
it's
It's like
so brilliant
conspiracy
how they
theories.
did that though,
Yeah,
because that kind of like it's sort of how Metal Gear Solid 3 is very like campy, but it uses
yeah,
that camp to like as a vehicle to like sneak in the hard-hitting shit that like punches you in the heart, right? Where it's
yeah,
like things about, politics and nations and like, what soldiers are, right? Like philosophically. And then
You know,
AC1 kind of did the same thing, where it's like in the modern day, it's like you have all these crazy conspiracy things. That's just to like let your guard down so that the real stuff that it talks about can like get into you.
AC1 was a commentary of the age in which it was being made. I mean, the entire Altair's Animus segments, this invasion of the Middle East by a group of shadowy elites who want to spread what they believe is their enlightened beliefs to a benighted people. It's so totally taking the piss out of neocons. Like, come on.
Of course.
So totally taking the piss out of Bush.
Yeah,
You know,
it's very apparent, like if you
yeah.
think about it for even like a moment. And the fact that like a video game that you can just like play on your PlayStation 3 or whatever the fuck was like willing to do that in 2007 is like
It's pretty crazy, you know?
give me that world back. Like
It's so interesting because it's like, the game is trying to say something about ideology. I mean, you often see in like these high school book report literary analyses on YouTube that you so often get about these games,
mhm.
that it's like, oh, maybe the Templars were right. It's like, no.
No, like
It's like
they very
the whole
clearly are
point.
not.
Yeah, like the whole point is that AC1 is trying to say something about ideology and the way that it poisons conviction into a weapon.
Yes. And I
Right.
think what's really it's kind of a double-edged sword because it needs the Templars to have this kind of appeal in order to speak its message, basically.
Yeah.
But as a result of that, some people will inevitably like latch onto them as being like, oh, like the Templars are cooler. Like I would prefer to be like on their side. You can't really have one without the other because if you make them insufficiently tempting, shall we say, or insufficiently persuasive, the examination of like the strength of dogma and like the appeal of dogma, it just explodes basically. It doesn't work anymore.
It was commenting on its specifically ideological times in an era where American empire was being dressed up in these extremely ideological overtones,
Yes.
spreading democracy. The entire point is that the Third Crusade in AC1's
It's a
sort of
parallel to
rendition of the
that.
history, yeah, it's the Templars trying to spread their vision of progress in a way that has horrifically evil consequences. It's a critique of that. If you are trying to say that the Templars are right, actually, you might as well say that Bush did nothing wrong.
Nowadays, we live in an era where shit is pretty rough in
Yeah.
numerous places around the world, especially if you're certain kind of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now would be like a perfect time to bring out a game that has the
It's
conviction and the
transgressive in
is
this way,
transgressive, yeah, because like that's kind of what assassins have always fought against, is like this kind of this flavor of tyranny, right? Like this idea that like you can justify anything as long as you can make people believe that you're saving them from like undesirables. If I could have my wish and if I could have my way, I would love to see an AC game
Oh, yeah.
release that is willing to just examine oppression along axes like those.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need an AC1 nowadays, not just in terms of like how stale a lot of AAA game design has become, but also just like we need an AC1 that's like actually willing to stand up to its own era and actually critique it in the way that AC1 did in 2007.
It's why I'm constantly low level buzzing, craving an interest for whatever Hexe might be, like in the back of my mind, because it's very apparent that it's like Holy Roman Empire witch trials, right? Like German witch trials.
Yeah, it's a perfect setup for this.
It's literally like you could absolutely read parallels to our current modern day. And I think it's just we need a story like this where it's like, hey, like this is fucked up.
There's a lot of discussion to be had with like Assassin's Creed and history. It's like for me, it's like I don't really take the historical stuff very seriously because my engagement with history is very like academic. What I really love about, Assassin's Creed 1 and some of the other stories in this series, like Assassin's Creed 3, right? They use the history in ways to make thematic points about the eras in which they lived,
Yes,
right?
yes. That is has always been personally my favorite thing about the series, and it even spiderwebs out to small little details like,
Yeah.
the way the hidden blade is slightly different in every era, right? Because like
Yeah.
the tools change to adapt to the setting, the context
Yeah.
rather. The assassin changes physically, mechanically, and ideologically to adapt to the context.
Kind of the problem is that there's been such a like emptying out of like this ideological content,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
In later games where it's like that ceases to really matter, right? It just becomes about the historical tourism, right?
yeah,
The history is no
exactly.
longer being put to use
Yeah,
in a way that is interesting or thematic. It's just there as pure empty aesthetic.
it seems so dimmed and just dulled and toothless. You honestly see this across like other fiction nowadays as well.
Yeah.
Like I recently read a visual novel called The House in Fata Morgana. As I was playing that game, like reading through that VN, like there were so many moments where if I were reading like a more contemporary work, the story would have pulled its punches right here. It would have held back right
Yeah.
here. But every time in the House in Fata Morgana, it just like fully went balls out with like the disturbing and important shit that it's like examining. And I'm just like, damn, it really makes you miss when stories actually had like courage to potentially piss people off or potentially like frighten people or disturb people or indeed alienate people.
Kind of ultimately goes back to that problem where it's like, when we gamify something, it's like we need to have the courage to actually alienate people and to force them to reconceptualize how they understand games in this particular game. The same thing with stories. The ideal is that, we force you into kind of, despairing of, or the reality that you knew is fundamentally compromised. But
Yes.
now you have the opportunity to reconsider and recontextualize yourself in response to this new truth.
It allows you to see things differently. It allows you to build a new understanding, which is something that very few people are afforded the opportunity to do. Like certainly not with regularity. Like,
The best media, I think, are the ones that kind of cause you to reconsider your sense of reality. Really take this hard knock in terms of like, what do I believe in? What do I stand for? And what does this stand for? What does this believe in? Because that's what forces you to actually go beyond just pure sensuous experience, which is not really real in any sense, and to actually go into this kind of more advanced speculative thinking, right?
yeah, I think other than the House in Fata Morgana, which I just briefly mentioned, the last time I think that happened to me with a piece of media, like to just such a deep extent, was probably Sense8, if you've ever heard of that. It's a Netflix show by the Wachowski sisters, basically. It's really interesting. It's one of those stories where like the less you know about it going in, the better, but it's fucking fascinating. It's something that made me uncomfortable like on numerous occasions, and it's also just like really cool.
Sounds like it has like kind of a similar appeal to The Matrix, honestly.
Yes, I mean you can probably imagine, right? Like I'm really
Yeah.
drawn to stories like those where it's like you experience it and then you cannot think about things the same way again after, and it is uncomfortable and it is a little distressing.
Yeah, I think the Wachowski sisters are good at that kind of style of transgressive storytelling where it's like they really force you to reconsider your sense of like what you think is real or not real.
Something I love very, very much, and something that Assassin's Creed used to really value, with the
Yeah.
whole in AC1 they blatantly like stated outright a few times, where Vidic is like, used to be like there's a book that claims the world was made in 7 days.
Yeah.
Bestseller too. God, Vidic is such an asshole, but he makes me think. Like everything he says
Yeah.
makes you think. Like you want to hate him, you want to disagree with him, and you probably should. The stuff he says, it's really just like damn. Like no wonder Abstergo have gotten this far, because if you're not careful, like a lot of the things he says, they can be pretty compelling. Like you can be enraptured by them and like enfolded into them.
Part of what makes AC1 so cool in terms of its storytelling is that it is so sort of cold and dispassionate because it's so focused on being cerebral and ideological above anything else. Because, obviously there's characters and character arcs and character development, but you never get this kind of human warmth that you get from like AC2
Yeah,
and the rest of the series.
the
It's all
coldness.
very alienating.
Yeah, that's something I cherish about AC1, like that coldness. Like, you know how people talk about this whole concept of like cozy games, right? And then
Yeah,
it's given rise to conversations where it's like, well, cozy games aren't actually cozy for me. Like my cozy game is like Resident Evil 2, for example,
yeah,
right? So like as kind of like a flip side to that, I have games that I play when I'm like just unconsolably depressed, right?
yeah.
Like very few things can make me like feel stabilized when I'm just like incredibly depressed. But without fail, if I start a fresh playthrough of Assassin's Creed 1, there's something about like how cold and like just disconnected and honestly at times like inhuman you feel compared to like everyone else around you in that game. It just really like recovers me when I'm in that state of mind.
It speaks to something. I'm trying to figure out what exactly it speaks to, but I think there is something really interesting about, the sort of disconnected, dispassionate storytelling that AC1 is so good at.
Even things like Altair's idle
Yeah,
animations, if you just leave him standing still, he'll like clench his fists in like silent rage sometimes. And that's just part of his
yeah.
idol. Like, what the hell? Like, it's
Oh
so.
yeah, it's so cool. Yeah.
It's just these little things that like later assassins don't even have like little touches of personality like that in their idols, I don't think. Like,
Yeah.
years later we would get Senu like landing on Bayek and like he can like pet her and feed her and stuff, but that's like that was years and years and years and years later. Like whereas this is like way back in the day, and it's not just like
Yeah.
a cute touch. It's like it says something about this character. He just reveals in a moment where he's sure like no one is watching him. There is
Yeah.
something about that that really conveys like how much he's holding back, and I think that that is really really rare. Because like to
Yeah.
me, Altair's rage is something that is very much a contrast to like someone like Kratos, who is very like outward and very like expressive with it, right? Whereas like
Yeah.
Altair's position doesn't really afford him uncontested and without consequence the ability to like explode and express that rage outward, barring
Yeah.
like
It's
specific
very
scenarios.
internalized and cold.
Yeah, which I think is really interesting because it's kind of like, lifting weights when you want to like make yourself better physically. The game
Yeah.
wants you meditative and it wants Altair meditative. And so it stress tests him and it stress tests you as well, which is something that I think is not a bug, like it's a feature. How do I say it? Just this idea of like, oh, you're doing Altair's day job, right? Like, why should I have to do all this like annoying busy work? This was my like I'm gonna become the Joker moment, right? This was my like,
Yeah.
games are art moment for me because I realized like people just don't care that that is intended to give you a certain emotional experience that brings you in resonance with this character. You're not supposed to
Yeah.
like it. You're not supposed to be happy about it. You're supposed
Yeah,
to
you're
be
supposed to be
pissed off.
feeling the same way as Altair.
Yeah. And the fact that it achieves that doesn't mean the game fails. Like it means that it succeeds. You just don't like that it's succeeding at making you feel something you don't want to feel.
Games are at their best when they are challenging you. I mean, it kind of goes back into the discussion of like games are just this piece of software that you apply design to gamify them, right? The game doesn't come from them from just like interacting with it. The game comes from how it's designed. It's the artistic intent, that challenges you, that pushes you, that makes it a game. It's the same thing with the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the narrative is like pretty alienating. There's so little humanity to latch onto in
Yeah.
AC1's story. But that's what makes it interesting and thought provoking.
It's what makes it my favorite because like where else can I get
Mine
something
too.
that
Yeah.
feels like that? Like I've been looking for it my whole life. It's very rare.
And it's what makes me like so angry to return to this problem of like how we criticize these games because we don't actually take these games on their own merits. We apply these definitions that we create out of thin air from the franchise in general or from what games should be in general, and those definitions don't actually mean anything, right? They're just kind of there. They're arbitrary. All of this unique interesting stuff that AC1 does in its story, in its game design, it's just no one cares, and I hate it. But, that's kind of the paradox of this entire series is that these games, by their very nature and the design principles that they followed, they were very transgressive. What became emphasized about them is how they became
How
the
they
opposite,
conformed. Yeah.
how they conformed.
Like they
Yeah.
started transgressive, and that is what drew people to them. And then over time, it's like the meme that people talk about where it's like, oh, they didn't just want some money, they wanted all of the money. Right? Like, and in the
Yeah, but
pursuit of that.
it's not even just that they began to conform, it's just that it's like there's this principle of retroactivity where it's like the game's always conformed. That's
Right.
like the narrative that comes out from
Yeah,
that.
and that was like not even, I don't even know like necessarily where that comes from. Well, I know where it comes from, but it just feels like something that should be so easy to disbelieve and to like help others disbelieve. And yet, here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I just
Yeah,
it's
I
crazy. Like if you just play AC1 in 2026, like right now, it's
yeah,
like it's so, and you've never played it before. Like it's so different from anything else you've played. Like I guarantee. Like so many
yeah,
people, they could try that game right now and be like, "This is fucking weird."
yeah.
Like,
Like, and it's cool. Yeah, and it's like people don't even understand the depths of how weird it is,
yeah.
right?
It's funny how like it's willing to surface some of its weirdness, but then it keeps like the real weirdness kind of like under the hood, you know? Like,
Yeah. Like I still think the idea of like assassinations taking place in an entire district, I think that would still break people's brains today if they actually understood that that was the case.
yeah.
But that's just like that doesn't happen. Where you have a mission here and then actually no, it's taking place in the entire district.
I would love that. I wanna see that again. Like,
Me too. Yeah. I guess kind of one of the things we really discussed that ties it all together. Assassin's Creed is better when it exists on its own merits, right?
yeah.
When it's trying to do something rather than, kind of this emphasis on the way content is distributed throughout the open world and blah blah blah. It's more interesting when they're actively challenging that principle by making the gameplay and the way it interlocks with level design, with city design, with AI and all these others into these dynamic interlocking feedback loops,
Yeah.
right, that feed into each other. And the same thing with the story. The story is more interesting, I think, when it is uniquely itself rather than trying to have these principles of like, oh, well, what makes a good story,
Yeah, like we need
right?
to have this archetype and we need to have this situation, right? That is like familiar, right? And it's like there's a lot of AC1 that like, it kind of eschews familiarity,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, that's what makes it cool. There's like an aesthetic tension in EC1
yeah.
that makes it so interesting.
And I think it values that distance in a way that like even later games don't, because that like milky filmy like animus glitch layer is always between you and the game. Like constantly you're reminded like you're in a machine, to an extent that like the other games don't care so much about that anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's really intentional. Like it's designed to
Yeah.
like
The
put
the
that distance
game,
between you.
that's like kind of the big tension of AC1. That's like that kind of makes its aesthetic so cool. It's
Yeah,
like everything is trying to alienate you, but the story is
making
trying
you
to actually
sink.
have a narrative, making you sink. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're like in push pull with each other, and you just feel so like, I don't know, it just feels so weird. It's so good. I love it.
It's awesome in a way that it's like the other games don't really do.
I kind of agree with what you say. Like, I love when Assassin's Creed is in conversation with itself.
Yeah.
Because, like, a lot of the times it does feel like it's trying to be in conversation with other games. And yes, we compare, we do sometimes compare Assassin's Creed to, like, contemporary titles, like, released, like, around the same time. Odyssey to games released around Odyssey. We compare Unity to games released around Unity. There is space for those conversations. I think they're still important. They'll always be important because there is an argument to be made that Assassin's Creed also just doesn't really reach like a certain standard of quality compared to other titles that tend to emerge around the same time. And, players do kind of let it get away with that. But then
Yeah.
that almost makes it more heartbreaking that it's also not super being itself either. you know, because that is kind of what made Assassin's Creed forgivable in like the older games for me personally, is that I would play something like AC1 or AC2 and I'd be like,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, this is straight up just like a worse video game than like a lot of the stuff that came out around it. However, it's doing stuff that the other things aren't, and thereby it's okay, right? Because like I'm willing to concede that. I'm willing to give up that comfort and that quality of life. I'm willing to give that up because I'm getting an experience that nothing else is giving me. Whereas nowadays, it's like you'd have neither one nor the other. It's like, okay, this isn't like as great as other things that I could be spending my time and money on, and all the more, it's also just not particularly like unique or being its own thing either. And so, like, what are we
Yeah.
pursuing, right?
Yeah, like what's the point anymore,
Yeah,
right?
that has been
It's like,
my evergreen disappointment.
yeah, I mean, I think for me, that's kind of why, bring it back full circle, that's why I was kind of bored by Syndicate. And then when I tried Origins, I couldn't finish it. You know, what does this game really do on its own merits, you know, in conversation with itself that is fun for me? You know, of course, it could be fun for other people. Other people vibe with those games, and that's fine. That's cool.
Yeah,
But for me, it's just like, there's nothing really there for me,
yeah,
you know, because it's just, this feels really similar to other games that I've played that are a lot more cohesive and fun for me. They don't bring anything unique to the table. Whereas, like, the older games, for all of their faults, for all the ways in which we failed, which we have documented throughout all of this,
yeah. They're
right?
so unrelentingly themselves.
Yes, exactly. And you can't get that anywhere else.
Yeah.